Hello, everyone. We can do better. I'm like, what day is it? Is it Wednesday? Is it Thursday? This week has just been interminable. It's Thursday. So tomorrow's Friday, which is great. I'm Shalanda Baker, and I'm the inaugural Vice Provost for Sustainability and Climate Action here. I think my role came about due to some of the advocacy of people in this room. I'm really grateful to be here. I think today I'll introduce myself a little bit, talk about kind of my journey to just get to this room and before you. And then I want to dive into some of the elements of my portfolio, including some of the goals I have over the next several years. I'm hoping that we'll end this conversation in conversation. I'd love to hear what's on your heart, what's on your mind, what keeps you up at night. I know you work in such an important area of research and study. And so I know there are many things that probably keep you up at night, but I'd also like to figure out how I can support your work, how I can support even your advocacy in the area of climate. So with that, let me just give you a little bit of background on who I am. So again, the inaugural Vice Provost for Sustainability and Climate Action. I come to you, let me just go ahead and put this in my pocket. I come to you as a first generation college graduate, as a proudly queer woman of color, Black woman, and all of that really informs my story and how I enter the work. Most recently, I served as the nation's lead for energy justice. I was a political appointee, Senate confirmed appointee in the Biden-Harris administration, where I served as the director of the Office of Energy Justice and Equity, which is an office that was formed to actually design and implement an equitable and just energy transition and create an energy system that worked for all Americans. So I was there for almost 4 years, and before that, I worked as a professor of law, public policy, and urban affairs at Northeastern University. I'm a former military officer. I'm someone who's worked in the nonprofit world, and again, all of these things are mainly elements of my background that inform my day-to-day work. So I know how to speak to communities, I know how to speak to business and industry, my colleagues in the academy, and always in bringing the lens of diversity into the work and understand how so many of our systems have operated to create significant harm in certain communities. So I just wanted to let you know, those are my priors. But I come to this work with a pretty immense portfolio, and I'd love to get into some elements of that here. So in today's kind of formal presentation, I'll give an overview of our university sustainability efforts. I'll talk about the history, and again, some of you contributed to that history and the work that really led to my appointment. I'd also love to just give an overview of the elements of my portfolio. What am I here to do? And how does it fit within the larger structure of the university sustainability enterprise? I'll then talk about some of my key initiatives, some of the things I see as low-hanging fruit, easy wins, and some of the things I think are harder. And then finally, I'm hoping we get into a pretty robust discussion. I will say, as a former corporate lawyer and a former military officer, I have a very thick skin. So I welcome your critiques, I welcome your input and feedback. And I'm doing something similar in many other places in the university and getting a lot of input from folks about what they'd like to see the university accomplish in this space. So I always like to enter a job or a problem trying to understand what I'm solving for. And so I think our challenge as a university is being able to serve as a site to accelerate climate action in a world that is deeply unequal and is already impacted by climate change. So how can the university serve as a site to accelerate climate action in a deeply unequal and climate impacted world? Newsflash, guys, universities were not designed for that. Simply, right? A lot of times folks come into the university as scholars, as researchers, they focus on their research problems for 5 to 7 years, they publish, they get all the stars on their CV, and then they put those publications on the shelf and continue their research agenda for the next 5 to 7 years. So research is not really designed to make an impact in real time. And so the question is, how do we accelerate the work that's happening in this university into the real world? How do we translate it in a way that makes an impact at a shorter time horizon? I would also add that we face a number of headwinds right now. I mean, I don't need to tell you what those headwinds are, but certainly the university, meaning university writ large, academy, is being challenged to show its worth. What does it mean to be in an institution of higher ed right now? What's the value of this place to students, to community members, to industry? And how do we continue to show our relevance? We're being asked to do that in ways we've never had to do them before. We're also in a very politically charged world. I know there are going to be those who say, well, you know, we can't say climate change anymore. And so those are real questions that people are asking. We can't say environmental justice. We can't say fill in the blank. And so now we're also being challenged to think about how we talk about this work and how we continue to do the work. So when I wrote this slide, when I first started, or a couple months in, we didn't have the same headwinds that we have now, but we have more to contend with. So just for those of you who are kind of new, so how many students do we have in the room? Yay, I love it. Okay, great. Faculty as well? Staff? Great. Okay, so this is a really diverse group. Some of you have been here through some of the history, but let me review it. This is recent history, by the way. Folks have been working on sustainability and environmental justice on this campus for decades. The University of Michigan was the first university in the country to have an environmental justice program, and it was housed at the School for Natural Resources and Environment, which is now SEAS. SEAS was the first, and there's a debate about this, but I will say it's the first school for environment and sustainability in the country. ASU is also one of our contenders in that space, and they always say, no, we were first. But in any case, we have a long and storied history in this space. But in our recent history, beginning in March of 2021, the president, the then president of the university, created a commission to really look at our carbon neutrality goals and how we would reach them as a campus. So the President's Commission on Carbon Neutrality was a publication that came out of that effort, which really established the imperative for deep investments across the university in sustainability. And this was mainly focused on facilities, but also our research enterprise. And again, how are we going to establish, the question that was being raised was, how are we going to establish ourselves as a global leader in carbon neutrality, and what should our commitments be, and what's the infrastructure that's going to support that? So that was in 2021 under the leadership of President Schlissel. Fast forward a couple of years to March of 2023, my boss, Provost McCauley, established a working group to really think about the leadership structure in her office regarding sustainability. And so that working group came out with a recommendation that they establish my role, a Vice Provost for Sustainability and Climate Action, to coordinate all of our cross-campus activity. So pause. What is the magic word at UMich in terms of how we do our work? Decentralized, right? We're decentralized. I think someone was like, we should do a bingo game. Like, how many times in a day can you hear the word decentralized when you're talking about the University of Michigan research enterprise? So one of the things I heard when I came in was, we're really decentralized, we value that decentralization. Okay, but the question I had was, okay, how do I actually coordinate all of these decentralized, really excellent nodes of work to move us forward, right, in a sort of unified way? How do we make the whole greater than the sum of our individual very excellent parts? So the working group recommended that my role be established to do that coordination and to provide that functional support at the provost level. Spring of 2024, which was just last year, President Ono established the Vision 2034 document, which really puts our flag in the sand on several issues, but especially on issues regarding environmental justice, sustainability, and issues concerning the environment. So Vision 2034 said, we want to lead in these areas by 2034. This is where we're going to be. And so just this year, we launched a capital well, actually in the fall. So this school year, we launched a capital campaign really focused on doubling down on the elements of Vision 2034. And the capital campaign, the Look to Michigan campaign, has several priorities. Among them are life-changing education, health and well-being, democracy and civic and global engagement, and then of course sustainability and climate action. And you may have noticed that we're organizing theme years around this. And so this year was a year of democracy and global engagement. That's been going on. Next year will be the life-changing education year. The year after that, I'm hoping, will be the year of sustainability. And I think we're going to be ready that year. We're going to be ready to rock. Okay, so my office was established 7 whole months ago in September 2024. And my portfolio is, just small. This is a representation of it. So I am in charge of the areas of education and curricular development, research and innovation, and then campus community and external engagement, which I really see as community impact. My counterpart, who I'll talk a little bit about, my counterpart in the CFO's office is very much focused on campus infrastructure and business operations and sort of our net neutrality goals that we have established through the President's Commission on Carbon Neutrality. So these 3 areas on the left side are the focus of my portfolio, but these boxes are kind of false distinctions. These things bleed together, they run together. I think curriculum is very much embedded in the campus community and external engagement piece, right? How do we do engaged learning? How are we actually in communities learning in partnership with them? How are we doing research in partnership with communities? So again, those boxes are sort of false distinctions, and they really do run together, but it's one way to think about organizing the work. I mentioned I would talk a little bit about the leadership structure. I know when I was in law school, I was like, I don't know who runs this university. I just need to know what I'm assigned to read and how to move forward in my work. But this is a little bit of behind the scenes. So obviously we have President Ono at the top, and then he has 3 executive vice presidents. One is the CFO, one is the provost, and the other is the head of Michigan Medicine. So they all report to him. And then they have established sustainability leadership under them as well. So within the provost's office, I'm her senior leader focused on sustainability and climate action. In the CFO suite, my counterpart, Shauna Weber, is the associate vice president for campus sustainability. And then on the Michigan Medicine side, which includes the med school, we have Tony Denton, who's a senior vice president for, and chief ESG officer, environmental social governance officer. So that's the leadership structure. And that was in place once I joined the team in September. We are now, the 3 of us at the vice president level are establishing a cohort, sort of an executive leadership council, to lead the campus community around issues of sustainability. And we anticipate creating a sustainability advisory board or broader climate council, which will have members of all of our different stakeholder areas. So we'll have folks who are there from the Ann Arbor colleges and schools. Dearborn and Flint will be represented on this broader council. We'll also have representation from the Vice President's Office for Research, along with community members, student life, athletics, government relations, et cetera. So we are going to be building that out, and you can expect that in the next 6 months or so. Okay, so I want to drop into my vision for this role. So quite simply, it's to position the University of Michigan as a global leader on just transition and to actually facilitate transformative research, teaching, and community-facing partnerships across our campuses. And so when I think about Michigan, the university, again, our excellence in so many areas really lends itself to being a global leader. We know that. But when I think about Michigan, the state, we're going through a transition. So regardless of who's in the White House, we can already expect hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars of investment in this state for the energy transition. That's coming. We also know that we can expect hundreds of thousands of people to migrate to the Great Lakes region because this is seen as a climate refuge, free from some of the climate extremes of the East and West Coast. The literature is telling us that that's happening. And then we also have all of these amazing natural resources, not least of which is 20% of the world's fresh water in the Great Lakes. So we are going to be in the bull's eye of the global transition. We are going to grapple with questions earlier than many other places are grappling with those questions. So questions of resource allocation, gentrification, inequality, climate emergency, a lot of those things are going to be happening here. And questions of how we do an equitable and just energy transition while creating prosperity across the board, those are going to be happening here as well. And so I'm excited to be here in this moment because for the next 5 to 10 years, all of that is going to be coming to a head. And I think as a research university, as a public research university, we should have a seat at the table. And we should actually provide neutral research to help lead in this space, to engage with policymakers, the business community, and communities writ large. So this is my vision. So how do we actually operationalize this vision? And this is super simple and lean. And again, I hope we get into a conversation about operationalizing this. So I don't have a deep bench. My biggest team member here, Kathy Rivera, is my administrative assistant and so much more. But it's the two of us as full-time staff. I have 50% of someone named Liesl Clark, who used to run Eagle, and I'm hiring an assistant vice provost. But likely, it's going to be a fairly thin team. We like to keep things thin and lean in the provost suite. So one of my superpowers is going to be convening. How do I convene groups across campus? How do I convene students, faculty, cross-cutting groups, our centers and institutes who are focused on sustainability and climate? How do I convene external partners? That's one of the superpowers of this office. This office is also really positioned to incubate the best ideas. So how do we create seed grant programs, other incentive structures to accelerate impact, and also accelerate transformative teaching, as well as place-based initiatives? I think my office should be a mini think tank and a site of experimentation. And so we should also create the incentive structures and the sort of seed grants and other things that are going to accelerate change. And then finally, this office is really designed to coordinate. So we're going to be coordinating resources, creating central hubs so people know where to go to get information, tools for teaching. So obviously you all are very enmeshed in climate and sustainability education, but what about the pharmacists? What about the nurses? What about those who naturally don't see themselves within the sustainability world or climate world? My job is to make sure every single faculty member has access to resources to embed climate curricula into, or climate courses and related topics into their curricula. So that's one thing I'm really excited about. I'm also here to coordinate interdisciplinary research. That's a key focus of our capital campaign. Our biggest donors are no longer interested in funding one thing. Some of them are, but most of our donors are like, how do we create transformative change? And they see it through the lens of interdisciplinarity. So partnering, breaking down silos, and they joke about the decentralized nature of this place. They're like, yeah, we know you're decentralized, but figure it out, work together, play together, create new degree programs, create new internship programs, and other ways for you to collaborate. So that's going to be a key role of this office. Also, one of the goals is to coordinate students, as well as, again, those external partners. A lot of folks are ready to play with us. We burned some bridges in some communities as well. We've come in and done research and left without having sort of a continuation of relationship. And so the next time folks want to go into the same communities and talk to people, they're like, oh, you're from UMich? No, I don't want anything to do with you. So part of my role is to help repair some of those relationships, but also hold those relationships across a longer time horizon. We have lots of folks who do this well. But again, how do we do it at scale? We have to be able to do this at scale in order to accelerate impact. So there are a few existing things that I was so lucky to inherit in this portfolio. One is the Graham Institute for Sustainability. Graham has been around for 20 years. And so the question is, what do the next 20 years look like? What does Graham look like at 2025? Well, we're in 2025. I can't believe we're in 2025. No, what does Graham look like at 2050, right? When we know we have to be at net zero, when we know we're going to be operating in a climate change world, how does Graham get elevated through this office and through this work? So I'm really excited to be working closely with Graham to think through those questions. The second key amazing part of this portfolio is the Mathai Botanical Gardens and Nichols Arboretum. I work closely with Tony Kalinick through Mathai and also with Jeremy Motater at the campus farm all of these three things were pieces that someone had the prescience to say, let's have those report to this office and think about how we utilize these resources to drive campus-wide initiatives for Campus's Living Learning Lab, to accelerate research innovations, to accelerate curricular innovations, and to really deepen our work with community partners. That's one of those are the reasons why these things landed in my portfolio. Okay, so I want to turn to some of the priorities, and then would love to get into a conversation. And so I have a handful more of slides. All right, got here in September, already had a full calendar. And so I've been on a listening tour. This is a part of that. I've been listening to students, to faculty, to staff, external partners. I do a lot of work with folks in Detroit, in state and local government, really just putting my ear to the ground to say, how can we support your work? What are we up to? And how can we be in partnership? This year, I've also been establishing cross-campus models for collaboration and goal setting. To that end, I've stood up an environmental justice community of practice, a group of scholars and researchers that don't know each other but are doing amazing work across this campus community. And so that's just one example. I plan to do the same in curriculum, and I'll talk about some of those specific goals. One of my goals in this next year, next 6 months, is to develop a metric-driven strategy and action plan. This summer, I'm actually going to the biological station with the leadership team to actually develop that strategy and plan. I think often people get hired in these types of roles and the boss pats them on the back and they're like, do great things. It's like, how do we measure impact? How do we know we're actually doing great things? And so that's one of the goals of the next year. I'm also the co-lead for I'm actually the lead for the sustainability and climate aspect of our campus, our capital campaign. So I'm working with a group of deans, I'm working with the Office of Development to actually tell our story on sustainability and climate across campus, and to be able to tell that story to donors who might be interested in contributing to our work. We're also going to be standing up our council that I mentioned. Okay, so on the curricular side, what am I thinking about doing in the short term? I'd like to establish a curriculum community of practice, which brings together folks who are already doing great work, teaching about climate change and integrating this into their curricula, but also trying to broaden the tent so that those who may not know how to do this can be at the table and help to think through programs that can incentivize their innovation. It's not enough to just say we're going to do it, but how do we actually create structures that support faculty? I'm also really proud to say that we've established a partnership with the Michigan Climate Action Network, and we've announced that we're going to be doing an internship program, which I'm calling the Climate Corps as a placeholder. So a Michigan Climate Corps that turns out hundreds of UMich students every year who are embedded in community-based organizations. We're planning to launch that in the fall at a pilot level and then bring it to scale. But I'm really excited. We're already working on that, and it's underway. In the long term, I'd love for every single student who comes through our doors be able to navigate our curricular offerings and understand what courses are offering by way of sustainability. It means they don't have to necessarily have a sustainability minor, but they know, hey, if I put these courses together, I'm getting the sustainability education I need. I'll be leveraging Atlas and leveraging Spire, which are two things that are already in existence for students to understand what courses they need to get and also what they're getting out of those courses. So I'm excited to create that navigator. In the long term, I know we have to accelerate our interdisciplinary multi-credit offerings, experiential learning opportunities, so residential programs in a place. We have our semester in Detroit. What if we had semesters at the biological station, right? What if we had offerings that really expand students' horizons, where we bring in faculty members from across different schools and colleges to teach them about topics related to sustainability and climate. So those are sort of some of the longer term opportunities or things that I'm looking to do, and then also a climate curriculum boot camp. Again, for those faculty members who are in pharmacy, in nursing, who want to learn how to teach about climate change and how they would embed that in their curriculum. We already do this at, again, small scale. I'm trying to do this at scale. 51,000 students, around 8,000 faculty. The question is, how do you do this work in a systemic way and in a structural way where we're, again, moving at scale? On the research side, I've already talked about the environmental justice community of practice. I'm also working closely with the Office of the Vice President for Research on what's called the Livable Futures Initiative. And so with that, we're leveraging the University Research Corridor, URC, which is 4 R1s in the state. University of Michigan, Michigan State University, Wayne State, and now Michigan Tech. And so we've already done one convening with water scholars here at UMich, thinking about Michigan in 2050. We're planning in May to bring together researchers, around 125 folks from all over the state, to think about the future of the state. Again, thinking about the unique challenges and opportunities we have here in the Great Lakes region. And so we're doing that, and the Livable Futures Initiative is really a scaffolding through which we want to think through several systems, like our food system, our energy system, our built environment as well. So that's really exciting. And we expect seed grants to come out of that as well, and multi-year funding initiatives at the interdisciplinary level, but also cross-university level. In the long term, I'm really interested in thinking about how we can support community research questions. What are questions community members have? How can we answer them? How do we co-create and co-design research problems, questions, problem sets? Again, folks already do this, but how do we do it at scale, and how do we accelerate impact? How do we make it real world? I think Oregon State has a program like this, where they solicit community members to bring in their research questions, and then they actually support that research through student projects and also work with staff. So again, it's professionalizing some of the work that they're doing, but I want to do that at scale as well. Okay, I'm also really interested in creating an interdisciplinary fellowship program in the long term to support really complex systems level research. I think we can attract scholars from all over the world to come to Michigan to play and to develop, new solutions to complex problems. I think we can support our internal faculty through funding to give them a break for a year or two to work on complex problems that can actually deliver solutions to our state, to the region, and to global partners. And so I'm really interested in that. Again, Harvard has a model like that. Stanford has similar fellowship programs, but again, we want to do it to solve some of the problems that we see here. And then I already mentioned kind of seed grants to support community research questions. Finally, on the impact side, and again, I feel like the community impact side really connects to curriculum, really connects to our research as well. But we have so many institutes and centers here focused on sustainability and climate. Food systems, Center for Sustainable Systems, right? We have so many of those. They don't talk to each other. The Herb Institute, even Graham. Folks are not necessarily talking together to think about how they all fit within this constellation of sustainability that we have here. I'm really interested in bringing those folks together, again, that convening power to accelerate our impact, but also to think about what core competencies each of these institutes and centers has. I'm also, in the short term, very excited about relaunching and rebranding Graham. Graham's been around for 20 years. Again, what do the next 20 to 25 years look like? In the long term, this is a placeholder name. I'm excited about establishing the Michigan Summer Climate Institute. So this builds on a model we already have, ISR, Institute for Social Research, where we invite scholars from all over the world to come and learn the Michigan way of doing social science research. What if we had a comparable institute for climate, where we bring scholars and practitioners and faith leaders and indigenous leaders from all over the world together for 4 weeks every summer to play together, to think about solving real problems and complex challenges related to climate and sustainability, and folks just bumping into each other, again, to work on, to accelerate their own research agendas, but also to share and learn from each other. So I'm really excited about that. Again, this interdisciplinary fellowship program is a thing that is not just about scholarship, but also about practitioners, and having scholars also bump into practitioners. I'd also like to establish Michigan as a key convener for peer institutions in this space. There's already someone convening us this year, but I'm really excited to kind of continue those relationships. And then, of course, we'll have the year of sustainability in a couple years. And with that, we're actually going to be able to collaborate collectively. So that's it, low key, not a lot going on, but very excited to partner with all of you and also excited to get your reactions on the portfolio and things that are top of mind. So thank you so much for inviting me today. Questions, comments, cheer me on, I don't know. Yes. Oh, yeah. And I heard we can toss this thing? Yes. Wait.
Does this mean I have to ask the first question?
I think you're on deck.
Yes. Thank you so much. That was inspiring.
Oh, good.
At a time when I think we all need inspiration, so I appreciate it very much. One of the reasons we wanted to have you over here, from your office way over in that other building like 20 feet away,
right.
Is to shine a light on the excellence in this department, and the kinds of work we do. Your presentation is amazing, and watching you speak and hearing you get excited about this, inspires us, as I just said. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say that you didn't mention ecology or biodiversity in the slideshow.
Okay.
And I think we are world leaders in that, and there are people in this room who can speak more to that than I can. We have an incredible collection of museums, a museum of zoology, and herbarium that are both world-class, that are really, shining stars at the university and in the country. And just incredible faculty and staff who work in these areas. And so I hope when you convene these groups that you pick out some of the many stars in this department, including grad students who I think are exceptional leaders as well.
Great.
I realize this is more of a comment than a question.
That's how it usually starts.
I was on the spot, and so that's all I could think to say, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I will say, again, I know I mentioned this at the beginning, but thank you so much for the invitation. It took a little while to get it scheduled, but I am excited to meet everybody on this campus. It's hard to get through every single department and school and college, but it's so important to really understand what's going on. So thank you. Yes.
Yeah, well, bravo to you, Shalanda. I've always been inspired when I hear your talk, and I hope that, despite the fact that it seems like other leadership at the university may be going in a different direction, that you keep pressing forward, and keep that idealism going. I think it's really important. I mean, some of us, myself included, see the climate action problem is very tied to biodiversity crisis, and I particularly see it tied to the food system because the arrows go in all directions.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things I would suggest for some of the initiatives you mentioned is that you look at the interdisciplinary nature of these challenges and their solutions, because some of them cannot be solved in isolation. And I think that you'd get a number of views from here about how biodiversity is being impacted by climate change, but also how cutting down forests and burning them and transforming habitats is contributing to greenhouse gas emissions as well. So these are very they're very essentially fundamentally related to many of the things that we study here. So I think again, I guess it's more of a comment but I think you've asked for that. So
no, absolutely.
I think many of us would be eager to participate in some of these things and have a lot to contribute.
No, thank you so much. I will say to that end, so one of the assignments coming in was make it all make sense. Shalanda, here you go. Here's this vast universe of sustainability assets, all these great places. What is the story? And actually the Capital campaign has helped me narrow that. So I went through an entire process. It was about 4 months where I looked deeply at peer institutions and how they were telling their stories. I mean, schools like UChicago and Harvard and Stanford that have similar excellent assets, but they're sort of like, here's our story. And so I looked at what they were doing. I shopped around. I presented that to deans, and I'm like, oh, well, maybe I can lean in a little bit to a shared story. And so from that and from some of those conversations, I've come up with a schematic of how we would begin to talk about our ambition and what's already happening. And one of those nodes is around systems and creating an activity hub where we would be bringing scholars together who are already working on systems level thinking, but to again bump into each other, because again, folks are working in silos and have no real incentives to play. And so what are the incentives I can create to get people to be at the table? And then how do we attract resources to really accelerate interdisciplinary collaboration? So that's the work. And I didn't share that today. I can pull that up if people are interested. But it's really a hub and spokes structure where we're sort of thinking about key areas of excellence where we're already doing great work, but people aren't exactly collaborating and don't have clear goals that they're trying to reach. So those nodes are really designed to get folks focused on shared goals and shared research agendas in some way, but not letting go of their own agendas, but thinking about the ways their work fits into broader systems and structures. So thank you for the comment. Yes.
Okay. I have a question.
Okay.
So, okay.
Is it a veiled question?
No, it's a hard question. So is this thing even on?
I don't even know if it's on.
I don't think it's on. Okay, I'll project. One of the things that I'm thinking about doing is developing a plan for the Evolution Society if the floor falls out and we lose all federal funding.
It's never going to happen. No, I'm kidding. Sorry, it's
right,
too
so
soon. It's too soon.
You're probably thinking about something similar.
Yeah.
And so if you were to develop a plan for how you can maintain climate justice, all of this climate, wonderful set of things that you've put together, how would someone go about this work with no federal funding?
Yeah. So, I mean, it is something that keeps me up at night. It's why I started with environmental justice. I kind of slept and woke up one morning like, I have to create an environmental justice community of practice, because I knew that was going to be the first domino. And sure enough, week one of the administration, there were orders calling out environmental justice grants. And so it was kind of prescient, but I mean, I didn't have to read too much into what was happening to know that if we had a shift in administration, EJ would be on the chopping block. The thing with environmental justice in particular is that a lot of those scholars have been bootstrapped for a long time. They've been relying on grant funding. They've been sort of self-funding and thinking about creative ways to fund their research. So there's a long tradition of not necessarily having the multi-million-dollar, multi-year grants to do the work they needed to do, because they were doing it in community and often doing it in partnership with community-based organizations. So with that, though, it introduces new models. It's like, okay, well, what would it look like for the university to be forging more partnerships with unlikely partners? I'm thinking community-based organizations, but also industry. I mean, industry has real questions and problems to solve. They want to partner with us. We know that can get sticky and challenging at times, right? We have to navigate some of that carefully, but also the state, local governments, they have real problems to solve. So what does it look like to rethink our relationships? Because again, the NIHs, the DOEs, the Department of Energies, I mean, these grants, I don't think they're going to come back at the level they have been historically. And so those who've been doing it already and partnering in untraditional ways, they can actually show the way. And so that might be an interesting way to think about the future. I actually also think we're going through a shock. There will be a period of shock and loss. And I think more important than sort of thinking about a plan now, we also have to mourn what that means. The thing that actually keeps me up at night around this, one of the many, is we're actually going to lose a generation of scholars. So, for the next several years, we won't be able to fund PhDs at the level we were funding them. So an entire generation of young scholars who were already bringing new energy and already bringing new vision to our field, we're not going to be able to support them. And so that's generational, especially when we think about things like environmental justice. So we have to mourn that, and then we have to strategize. Like, I don't stay sad for long. I stay mad for a long time. But it's sort of like, okay, now that we know what's coming, now that we know where we are, what's our strategy, what's our plan, and how do we hold the line in terms of our values? And so I already know, I can predict that this area is going to be in the crosshairs at some point. And we'll be asked about our commitments. I'm not here because of the job. Newsflash, I'm actually here because I think universities have tremendous potential to change the world. And I actually think this university in particular has a resonance globally that other places don't, and a potential. And we're in a climate crisis. We have to solve this. We have a 25-year runway. We're gonna have to deal with things related to adaptation, systems, food systems, the bird flu, that hopefully, no one was talking about that in the way we should have been talking about it. Shelves empty, eggs that are 3 times, no one was talking about the systemic and structural problems that led to that. So we're gonna be confronting that. And again, I think the university has a place in that. And we can't ignore, we ignore climate at our peril. So we can play games and change language, but at the end of the day, we're gonna have a 100-year flood. These things are gonna happen. And so we can't hide behind the fear of getting funding pulled. I think we have to double down. That's my position. And again, I know that the day is coming where we're gonna have to have those debates. And I hope you will support me in that and know that I will always be the tip of the spear. I take the challenge with a lot of honor, and gratitude. Oh yeah. Question.
I don't think it's working, but
It's a little low key.
Hi, my name is G. I'm a PhD student in this department. Again, lots of nice things have been said about this portfolio that you've put together and kind of your initiatives and your motivating factors, and those are all great and awesome. Something that Nate mentioned and that I want to double down on is that you talk about curriculum and teaching and research and the botanical gardens, and I think it's worth mentioning that a large body of the labor force that propagates all of those things, that actually does the work, the people in those greenhouses, the people in the labs, a large percentage of that is graduate students. And so I think universities can't fundamentally function how they do and to the capacity that we are able without that labor force, right? So when you say that you want to convene groups of people to think, to come up with strategic trajectories for the future of the university related to all of these things, and you mentioned C's specifically as a kind of pioneer of climate justice in a systematic programming type way. I recently was having conversations with C's students and master's students in particular in a massively underfunded program in terms of master's students specifically. They accept something on the order of hundreds of master's students every year with funding nowhere near guaranteed, and so that program itself has almost become a, generating profit as opposed to supporting graduate students. So my question to you is, what role do you see people in this large body of labor producing this work playing in that intellectual work that you're describing in terms of kind of charting the course, but also what responsibility do you think your office and other offices in the Provost suite owe to that large body of labor in terms of supporting them? Because you mentioned things like faculty grants, interdisciplinary, inter-university grants, but yet we kind of sit at a time where GSI positions and funding for graduate students have recently been cut. We have reason to believe are still on the chopping block, right? So I think that's kind of the essence of the question, right? What role intellectually, and then how do you plan to support those people?
Yeah, no, I love the question. And I haven't actually gotten it before. I get, you hear the similar questions when you're doing this type of thing. So it's one that I want to take back, but let me answer what I can here. So my office, I just hired 4 graduate students. Well, one is a senior in Pite who's going to have a master's and C's as well. The 3 other students are C's, master's students. So I'm aware of the immense talent we have across the university. Students are amazing. They're essentially staffing all those areas that I mentioned and key intellectual partners to me. I came back to the academy in part because I love students. So there's a richness in academic institutions that doesn't exist in other places like government, or I would say even industry and other types of places. So I'm here, and I very well understand that my salary is paid by students. I'm clear about who I serve. So those are my commitments. But structurally, I love to think about ways to sort of convene students, grad students, to think about ways this place can support your work. Unfortunately, it is just a couple years. For master's students, for PhD students, it's 5 or more, right, years that you get to be here. And that actually is really great, because often when an undergraduate is here, the first year is kind of like they're bouncing around, and they usually don't find their footing until maybe halfway through their second year or third year. And by then they're like, I have all these ideas, but I'm not going to be able to see them through. And I'm seeing that because I do engage a lot with undergraduates. So I think there's a lot of power in thinking about how we harness PhDs and also the master's students. So truly want to take that one back. The other thing you mentioned about master's programs is true. It's true. So a lot of master's programs around the country have been designed as revenue generators. It doesn't mean that the value isn't worth it, though. I know my colleagues at SEAS. I'm a faculty member there, tenured there. And they're great folks who are doing great work. There are also some initiatives there that allow students to partner with community members through courses, through clinics. So they're solving problems in a real way in ways that other universities aren't. But the fact remains that master's programs are revenue generating. It's true. So I would be dishonest if I didn't say that that's one of the models that not only certain aspects of our university, but other universities have deployed. And so happy to talk more about that, but I do think there is deep value in the degrees that we offer. Otherwise, people wouldn't want to continue to come. So the first point, I will definitely think about ways to sort of organize students, graduate level. And the second, your point is taken about the master's programs. I think on the labor side, that was a big blind spot for me. So I'm going to take that one back as well. I don't know if you feel that that was responsive, or if you're like, oh, yeah.
I appreciate your time and perspective.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, I hope you don't mind, but I do want to piggyback a little bit on G's question. So a central focus of your talk today was this idea of acceleration, of making all of these ideas come to fruition, and then be implemented. And as G said, a large body of this is on the labor group of students, undergrad, graduates, masters, PhDs. And so I'm wondering, what is the plan to keep this acceleration going when there are two main problems we're facing right now, which is funding and community? So the funding cuts G just mentioned, but also we received an email like minutes before your talk that all of the DI approaches are being cut. And so we're talking about enacting this plan in an unjust world. How do you plan on retaining and supporting your labor group?
Yeah, no, thank you for naming that on the DEI front. It's a drastic departure for the university. And it's one thing that drew me here. Its commitments, longstanding in DEI and in EJ, were what brought me to this place as opposed to other places. So I'm grappling with that emotionally too, and want to acknowledge that it's a really challenging time. I hope my failure to name specifically students in this didn't give you the impression that you're not in it. So my job is to make sure every student is prepared for the world they're going to occupy. So you have to be obviously integrated in all the research. All of the courses I'm talking about are to prepare students to operate in a climate change world, regardless of major, right? And so that's the broader vision. I think we're going to have challenges. I hope you know, I mean, I came from politics, but I'm not a politician. So like transparency, we are going to have issues now because of this stance that we've taken on DEI. We will have issues if we do not acknowledge that climate change is real and that sustainability is something we should be focusing on. I think it's short-sighted to think otherwise and to be focused on a political moment. So I'm with you. The landscape has changed. What are folks fighting for? What are folks, why are folks coming here? They're coming here because they think we have some core values that they're aligned with. I think that's going to shift. I think leadership has underestimated how much folks come to this place because of what it stands for. I'm included in that, right? I came here because of what it stands for. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But what I will say is that I'm in this role as the only person in my role who is here to do a thing. And I'm here to do it until they tell me not to. And so I'm also here to make sure every voice gets in the room. That's my training. I'm a community organizer. Like, this is what I do. This is what I've done for 20 years in my career. So there are some blind spots, some potholes. There are things I don't know about. There's a whole history of, some fighting that happened here that predated me around GSIs. I understand that. But I'm here to make it work and make it make sense. But ultimately, my job is to make sure every student who's here understands climate change and is able to operate in the world they're going to occupy. And so those master's programs that may seem like revenue generators, they have to make sense. They have to work. They have to be logical and coherent. They're not cheap. So there's some equity issues, right? We have to contend with those. But I'm never going to stand up before you and say, everything's great, don't ask me the hard questions, because there's some hard shit we have to deal with. Full stop. So I'm here for that. I'm here for the hard questions. I'm not going to hide behind my role or title. I want to make this make sense for the community. We have one more in the back. I did think I was coming for, warm and fuzzy, but never called it cute before. I feel like it was a little bit of a bait and switch. No, I'm kidding. It's fine.
Okay, this
Not
is perfect because Riley's question. I have more of like a blind spot or a case study that I think you as like a member of SEAS would want to know about. So one of my coworkers is in the SEAS master's program, and at the beginning of it, her advisor told her that she should quit her job to focus on the master's program full time, despite the fact that the job that she was in was paying for the master's helping her pay for master's program. So she stays in her job, does the master's program, is working with a community organization, analyzing that data. Her and her group have now written a paper that they would like to get published, and they were told this morning that there's no funding to publish the paper and they should pay for it themselves. And they specifically were told that they should focus on open access, so more expensive journals. So there's students who are trying to publish this very climate change relevant work, but are being told that they, as 6 random grad students, need to cobble together $10,000 to apply and publish this paper. So I think that that's maybe a blind spot or something that's happening where this funding, if we're going to publish these papers to be leaders in BEST, which I know we can be, needs to be available so it's not on the backs of these students who are already struggling to pay for this degree.
Thank you for that. There's a structural problem in publication, right? We know the world of publishing is deeply inequitable in terms of the open access, paying to publish, but this is one that we'll take back too. I think the role of my office is to try to tackle the structural problems. So if there's a way to create a fund specifically for this from the Provost's office, that might be something to think through. I have a cohort of provosts, vice provosts as well. The vice provost for undergraduate education, the Rackham dean is also a vice provost. I'm sure they encounter similar issues through Rackham. So it's definitely something I'll take back. If you email me as well, with that case study, I can bring that in as well. But there's always some tension between kind of the individual issues and the broader structural. But this is an individual problem that actually points to a broader structural problem that I think I can help solve. So thank you for bringing that.